Competitions are a great way to learn about cross-country flying, as it encourages you to thermal fast and be decisive in a safe and challenging environment, sharing and learning from the experiences you have with your fellow pilots. But you must remember to serve your apprenticeship and set yourself realistic goals, putting everything you've just learned into the next competition you do. It's good to have discipline and routine so that you're prepared and are able to wind down on the launch. Study the turn point photos and maps well and visualise yourself flying the task, drawing in turn point sectors and 5 and 10k radiuses from goal. The more time you put in on the ground, the more time it leaves you free to concentrate on flying during the task.
I managed to be very consistent in competitions, and that I think is a lot because I've been flying for such a long time. I've been flying for 26 years now, and the experience that I've gathered over all those years just makes it relatively easy for me to be able to fly the same way every day, or to fly the same way all the time, and that leaves my brain free to think about the particular tactics for the day or whatever.
One thing I think is the most important to begin to have success in competition is to be patient.
Yeah, I think patience is really important in competition and cross-country flying. But it's important to know how to fly fast, but to know as well that sometimes you have to slow right down and stop everything because the conditions are not as good, or they've changed, or whatever, or there's a big obstacle in front that you've got to find some way to get around. And I think that's for sure one of my strong points. And it's the never say die attitude that helps a lot sometimes.
You know, I used to think flying fast was in the paragliding, a speed bar, leaving low, flying very low all the time. But now I believe it's just not getting stuck. I mean, if you do an entire flight without getting stuck, you'll always be very close to the leaders, even if they are flying with more speed bar on. So it's just assessing the conditions, deciding, you know, how high you need to go. If there's a cloud street, you know, you don't need to go as high. You can fly underneath it straight. If there's nothing, you know, flying fast might just mean waiting in a spot, taking it easy, and you know, I mean, there's just so many things about it. But I think just fly conservatively. And just don't waste time. You know, if you're at the top of a thermal, go if it looks good.
It's important to be decisive and view competitors as lift markers and equals, not as pilots that are better than you. Never keep looking up at the other pilots, as it tells you very little and only winds you up. And believe you're a good pilot and trust in your decisions, because that's why you're there.
When you decide, okay, I'm going to decide, and you look at other people climbing up at the right, you begin, no, right, left. This is very bad. It's important to decide, I go to this mountain or wherever you are decide, but no changing the decisions. I think the first 2 steps, to be patient and to not be indecisions. And to learn English more.
The sort of cornerstones of my cross-country philosophy, at least for new pilots, are get nice and high, stick with whatever lift you find, knowing that you can't get high enough, and then when it's time to head off on glide, go straight and only straight until you run into a substantial thermal, and don't turn in anything that's not big.
¿Qué ataque? Bueno, vamos al ataque ahora entonces.
For me, the most important thing about cross-country is to be able to gear up and gear down for the conditions during the day. When it's strong and fast, then you fly aggressively, but when it's weak and smooth, then you calm down and chill. Flying fast and doing big distances is all about knowing when to speed up and when to slow down. So here we are, we just landed on this landing field, and the kids came running out with these windsocks, kiddie-made windsocks, bits of plastic. They were just standing there holding them up so that we could actually see the wind direction for our approach and landing, which is fantastically accommodating and so typically Mexican. They're really kind, really lovely little kids. And this is just part of the cross-country flight. I find this is often the best part. The decision-making, the speed to fly is fine, but when you land, the adventure begins. You meet all these kids, you meet different cultures, and then you've got a hitch to get back, all sorts of things. So don't just think of cross-country flying as just the flight. It's also the retrieve and the meeting of other people. But remember, we're ambassadors for our sport, so be polite, be nice to people, because if someone lands after you and you've been rude, you won't get such a warm welcome.
Welcome to Turkey. Türkiye'ye hoş geldiniz.
When flying cross-country, you may find yourself in beautiful and remote parts of the world like this, where the emergency services are there but are rare. So when you arrive, make sure you find the number of the nearest or best private hospital and also the number of the nearest helicopter emergency services, so that if an accident does happen, you're already prepared and you can call them immediately so they can get to the casualty as fast as possible. If you do see a downed pilot, then keep your cool and don't rush down there, as the air is likely to be very turbulent. Stay high if possible, circling above him, assessing the pilot's condition and also position. Once you know this, then get on the radio to retrieve or other pilots on the ground. Once they've confirmed the information and are on their way, then you can start to find a safe place to land. If you are that pilot on the ground and you are okay, then make sure you move around and you ball your glider up if you possibly can, so that it indicates to the pilots above you that you are okay and there's no problem. When you fly in thermals, you may find yourself having a few collapses. It's important to prioritise the situation and not to overreact. If you're in lift and you're going up and you have a collapse, then just keep the turn on, stay in the 360, and when you're ready, just pump it out. There are three main rules of glider control. The first is course correction. If you have a collapse and it takes you into the deflation, then use the energy of that dive to roll yourself away, getting onto a steady course, and then pump out the collapse. And second, if your glider really dives forwards, then brake that dive as much as you can. But the moment you start to swing underneath the glider, then ease off the brakes, let it climb out, gently dive again, and then fly away. And finally, if all hell's broken loose and your glider's all over the place and you really just don't know what to do, then ease off the brakes and let the glider dive forwards, braking again to keep that dive in check. But as soon as you swing underneath, gently ease off the brakes again and let it just fly away.
"5 o'clock syndrome," it's just a little catchphrase we use for when we get a lot of visiting pilots here or pilots that haven't flown big cross countries before. And the biggest problem they have is they get to around about 5 o'clock when the day changes. It changes from being a booming day to a light day around about that time of the day. Maybe the cloud streets start decaying and everything they've experienced up until that point in their cross country on that flight suddenly changes. Well, not suddenly, but it's a gradual progression, but they fail to notice it, so the next minute they're on a big glide and suddenly that thermal that they thought should be under that cloud isn't there. They've got to completely change the way they think when they're flying. So we get probably 80% of pilots decking it around 5 o'clock, give or take half an hour, on really good days where they could have carried on till 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And it's purely because they haven't changed their thinking.
Hey,
Hello.
Yo.
Going over it, judging by each 90-degree turn, we can see exactly what the wind strength is and which direction it's coming from. So once we know that, then we set ourselves up on the edge, on the boundary of the field, over the obstacles, i.e. tree lines or power lines. That way we know we'll never hit them. So we're using the tree line, the hedge line of the field, to do our base legs. So we lose our height, never turning more than 90 degrees away from the landing field, always keeping an eye on where you want to land, and then finally turning in to do small judging, correctional steering into land. Tard flare.
Oh, he's going to kiss the ground now.
So here are the bullet points on retrieve driving. First, have a good detailed briefing with the driver and the pilots so that they know exactly which direction you plan to go. Second, make sure that they all have the right radio frequency and also retrieve or stroke emergency telephone numbers. Make sure the information to the retrieve driver is clear and succinct. Once you've landed, make sure you get your glider to the road as fast as possible. You make sure it's put into a clear place that they can see from the road. If you do get an offer of a lift back, then don't take it unless you have got confirmation from the driver that you are going back with somebody else.
All good.
Right. Yeah, 120 kilometres. All right.
The most important thing is the feeling in the air, general feeling. If you feel comfort, that's the things. %90 of my testing time is in mountains with my pilot, of course, because the most important thing for the glider is the general feeling in the air. You have to feel very comfort, then the glider will be no problem. And then what I learned, the glider which is very comfort flying in the air shows no problem in the maneuver as well. It's more important you to fly in practical conditions. Some glider you fly like that, a lot of pitch up and down, so you don't really glide. And some glider flies really cutting through the air. That's the good one. So when you want to choose a glider, you have to choose the glider which is cutting through air more. That's more glide than, you have a lot of pitch momentum. Normally, if you fly too less weight, then all the maneuvers is like recovering tendency is slow also. But if you weigh too much, then all the reaction becomes too fast. So you always have to fly in the kind of tolerance. Before, a lot of pilots open harness this much to make a really big, things like that. But while for good pilot, that's fine. But for the weekend pilot, should fly the distance which manufacturer recommend. That's all the maneuver tests done. If you open much bigger, or if you open very tight, that it cause big trouble. For example, when you make big spiral, if you close as much as you can stay very, very, stable spiral, very high speed. Sometimes it accelerates even speed after you release. a streamlined harness will improve your performance a lot because of air drag is, drag is much less. It's better to fly intermediate glider 100% rather than competition glider 60% or 50%.
For me, the fly is one sport very interesting and very spiritual, and the competition is the way to training and to learn how to fly better, and for me it's the way to enjoy the life.
For me, cross-country flying is like three-dimensional chess. It's the ultimate man versus nature mind game, and every cross-country flight is a mystery flight because you don't know where you're going to end up unless you set a declared goal. But even then, you don't know how the flight's going to pan out. Even though you might be looking ahead at 50 kilometres down track, you certainly can't say for sure what the next thermal will be like, and that's what really gets me going.
Well, we couldn't come to Australia without visiting Stanwell Park. It's not a major cross-country site, but it certainly is one of the most historical. You can fly with good conditions about 50 kilometres to the south and about 15 to 20 kilometres to the north. But what's more important here is the fact that you can just use the smooth air to relax, get used to your kit, and also fly with your mates, because it's important to just relax and unwind. Just like in cross-country flying, you've got to relax and you've got to remember why you're there, because you enjoy it. In fact, we've enjoyed it so much today that we've missed that perfect orange sunset shot, and we've had to shoot in absolute darkness. But well, flying's a bit more important than filming sometimes. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this cross-country video. Just make sure that whenever you fly, you learn from every single experience you have and you put it to good use the next time you fly. But remember, the best pilot's the one having the most fun.
boats.
Here we are at Pizzaruna. Olu said his fucking snake.
Come on, man.
Sorry. Okay, ready? Oh, hang on.